All right, Kansas City fans, 21 off season. We are looking at the guys who play along the line of scrimmage today. I do apologize for interrupting you guys' Super Bowl run, but I learned last year there's such a tight turnaround from the beginning of February to the beginning of March that if I don't start fitting some of these videos in a little bit sooner, I don't get everybody in before the league year starts in about the second week of March. So I understand you guys are still not finished with your season. I usually try to leave teams alone until they are done with their season, but Kansas City, you're an exception. You just go so deep into the playoffs. You're playing until late January or early February, depending on whether or not you make the Super Bowl. So here it is, and if some of you don't want to watch it until after the season is over, I totally understand. So defensive line today, we will talk some about the money. I really want the focus today to be on more of what kind of a defensive line you have coming back next year and what the depth looks like and what the starters may look like and the guys who are going to get the most playing time and who may still be on a rotational basis. You've got 4 free agents right here. We'll cover them in a minute, but I do want to tell you who they are. Mike Pennell will be a free agent. Alex Okafor will be a free agent. Pasanya will be a free agent, and then Taco Carlton will be a free agent as well. So those 4 guys, your main guys will all be coming back, but you do have these 4 guys. We'll talk about them as we go through. Let's start with Chris Jones. Okay, this is the first time that you're actually going to see $22 million cap hit. It's a big cap hit. He is undoubtedly one of the best defensive players in the NFL. He faces double and triple teams every single week, almost every single play. He gets double and triple teamed, and yet he still gets pressure on the quarterback and still continues to put up pretty good numbers. Even the numbers, though, don't tell the whole story. I encourage you to just turn back and watch the videos on this guy, how he continues to get pressure on the quarterback almost every single play that he's out there. When the quarterback actually drops back, he is amazing to get pressure on the quarterback. And the best thing I think about Chris Jones is you didn't see a drop off this year, even after he signed his contract. A lot of times you see players get big contracts and their play just kind of drops off. And sometimes that's an effort thing. Sometimes it's just the fact that they aren't as hungry as the other guys who haven't yet got their guaranteed money. Chris Jones got the guaranteed money and still put together a monster season, perhaps not from a statistical standpoint, but from an actual video, watching him play standpoint, perhaps his best season ever. They take him off the field a lot of times against the run. He's not bad against the run. He is solid against the run, but a lot of times you'll see them take him off the field just to keep him fresh and keep him going after the quarterback and being able to stand up to those double and triple teams that he faces. So Chris Jones is back. He's signed now, I forget, for the next 4 seasons or so, but the cap number does grow, $22 million cap hit that you do have to deal with for Chris Jones. After that, and this is the defensive tackles basically here, the guys who primarily play on the inside, and then these are the guys who primarily play out there on the defensive ends category. Derek Nottie after that. Nottie is a guy who grew this year as well. Okay, Nottie in his first 2 seasons, we didn't see from him what we wanted to see when we drafted him. Was he solid against the run? Yes. Was he getting pressure on the quarterback? No, none, absolutely at all. In 2020, we saw him still not be able to get pressure on the quarterback, and that's what keeps him off the field a lot of times. That's why he's still a rotational guy. He is not the kind of guy who's going to get 800 snaps a season right now. He is a rotational guy, but we saw him step up even better against the run than he's ever played. He was actually ferocious against the run. You could see the growth. You could see the development. You could see that he was better than he has ever been. And the reason that's so encouraging is that you still have him back for one more season. $1.2 million is the price tag for Derek Nottie this season. You cannot beat that. If all he does, and I put that in air quotes, all he does is come back and play like he did last year, he is worth every single dollar, and he's a great value at that. What is really encouraging, though, is a lot of times when you see a player who is smart enough and hungry enough to develop in their 3rd season in one area of their game, you also have a player who is smart enough and hungry enough to develop in another area of their game. And so if you see him develop and get even better against the run like he did in 2020 and become even more ferocious at it and even more of a run stopper, it gives me hope that he could also figure out during this 21 off season how to get better at rushing quarterbacks. And that's not necessarily something that Kansas City asks of him, but I think this is something that he could work on and develop. And if I'm his agent, during this off season. I'm going to encourage him to do that, to try to find ways to get just a little bit quicker, try to find ways to develop those inside moves a little bit better. If he can do that, and that might not be the greatest news for Kansas City after 2021, if he can do that, he can get a lot more money in free agent during the 22 off season. Okay, if he's the kind of guy who shows you don't have to take me off the field during certain situations, you can keep me on the field at all times, and I will be just as good at getting pressure on the quarterback as I am at stopping the running game. Noddy is the kind of guy who could make a lot of money in free agency in 22. Even if he doesn't, if he comes back with the same performance in 2021 as he did in 2020, where he's good against the run and not so good against quarterbacks, he will still make pretty decent money in free agency, because there are teams who will need that on their roster, even if Kansas City elects not to bring him back because of the price tag in 21, or if they just decide not to do it, period. So that's something to keep an eye on from Noddy, but we definitely love the growth we saw out of him in 2020, and the price tag is perfect at $1.2 million. In general, this whole defensive tackle position is deeper and stronger than your edges. Your outside rusher guys, we'll talk about that more in a second. Mike Pennel, I said this last off season. I think I said it 2 off seasons ago. Pennel is a guy who's underrated and undervalued. And, it's one of those things that just doesn't get as much attention, doesn't get as much money in the NFL. But you have here a guy who is balanced. He does get pressure on the quarterback, and he does hold up well against the run. Is he good enough to be getting 800 to 1,000 snaps a season? Would he actually hold up under those conditions and be able to turn in the same performance? I don't know. But Pennell's a good guy to have on the team. He really adds the depth. Even if you're only giving him 400 snaps a year, he really adds the depth. You have no problem if somebody gets injured, and this is one of the big keys here. If somebody gets injured, you have no problem with Pennel coming in and playing for 2 months or 3 months, or even playing all the way through the playoffs. He's solid, he's consistent, and he's balanced. Run, pass, he can do either one. Pennell's a free agent, but this is one guy, and I don't expect the Chiefs to bring a lot of these guys back who might need to be re-signed because of cap concerns. But Pennell's a guy who, if nobody in the NFL wants to give him more money, I certainly would love to see him come back for $1 million, okay? I think he made a little bit less than $1 million last year, actually. So he would be a great guy to bring back because of the depth that he adds. And so when somebody gets injured, you do not have this massive drop-off. When Pennel comes in, he's already a significant part of the rotation anyway. He's already familiar with the system. He's balanced run versus pass. This is an incredible guy to have on depth when the injuries hit, and they always do. So Pennell's a guy that, even though he's a free agent, and the Chiefs probably aren't going to spend a whole lot of extra money this year because they don't have it, Pennell's a guy they can afford, I think, at $1 million, provided nobody else in the NFL is looking to give him more money than that. Travelle Wharton. All right, Travelle Wharton is a guy who puts a smile on everybody's face, right? I don't remember who I was watching, but it's one of the guys on YouTube who likes to cover the Chiefs, and I apologize, I can't remember your name, but he basically said the development of Travelle Wharton was kind of like finding a $20 bill in your blue jeans that you had completely forgotten about, or that you didn't know was there in the first place. And I thought that was a great way to put it. Travelle Wharton coming in and playing the way he played this year was completely unexpected. And yet it was such a relief, such a value here, that it actually could do huge things for you in 2021 and 2022 if he can just play the way he played this year. But I have every reason, and who knows, this might just be optimism or looking at his age. I have every reason to think that Travelle Wharton can be a guy who actually gets better than he was this year. He can play inside. I think he can play outside more than he's ever done in his career. He has that quickness. He has that ability to get pressure on quarterbacks, and he still holds up well against the run. This is one of the reasons I think that the Chiefs can not worry as much about the defensive end position next year. I think if you had to, and I will talk about this more in a little bit, I think if you had to, Travelle Wharton could slide out there and play a lot of snaps. And we don't know that for sure. Traditionally, he's the inside guy. He is an inside defensive tackle kind of a guy. But I think if he had to, this is a guy who could play a lot of snaps out there on the edge, still get pressure on the quarterback, and still get hold up against the run. as well. I don't think he's the kind of guy you want dropping back into coverage much, but the Chiefs don't ask their defensive ends to do that a whole lot anyway. Every once in a while, but that's not a huge thing they would be asking Travelle Wharton to do. So Wharton is a guy here. We still need to see more, but what we saw this year was a guy that nobody expected to really even play at all, and he turns out to be the kind of guy that you're like, man, this guy might develop into a solid starter and pick up 800 snaps a year, or he might even get more than that, depending on just how much he develops. I have every reason here to like what Travelle Wharton did last year and to think that he can keep that up moving into the future. But we still have to see the growth. We'll see about that as it goes on. Colin Saunders here. Saunders is a guy we still don't know what he is. It's been 2 seasons now. He just can't seem to get on the field enough because of the injury this year, and then just, I think, rotational issues in 2019. So we still don't truly know what Saunders can be. We hold out every hope that he can get better and that he can stay on the field and stay healthy. So we'll see about that. Saunders here, $1 million. Wharton, $1 million. They're both coming back, okay? So here at defensive tackle, your interior defensive line positions, whether they're playing that technical third defensive end or just the pure defensive tackle spots, you basically have 4 guys. Even if Pennel doesn't come back, you have 4 guys, Jones, Noddy, Wharton, and Saunders, who make you feel pretty good about defensive tackle. If you bring Pennel back, you have 5 guys who make you feel pretty good about either them getting better or you've already seen what they can do in providing good depth. So your defensive tackle position here is set. You don't have to do anything other than re-sign Pennel if they choose to do that. We'll see what Kansas City wants to do there. On the edges here with the defensive end, Frank Clark. This is the first time you're really going to feel this kind of number right here. I think he was, $18, $19 million this season. Next season, he is making $26 million. Frank Clark now is in the top 15 for 2021. He is in the top 15 most highest paid players in the NFL. Only 2 defensive players in 2021 will be making more money than Frank Clark. Only a dozen quarterbacks in 2021 will have a higher cap hit than Frank Clark has. It's a very, very large cap hit, $26 million. He is, I think, right now, the 15th highest paid player in the NFL in 2021. That wasn't true in 2020. It is true in 2021. He's number 15. That list will change somewhat because some of those guys ahead of him will get restructured through the offseason. It will also change somewhat if somebody else around the NFL signs another large deal closer to what Frank Clark is making. But as of right now, Frank Clark is the 15th highest paid defensive player in the NFL, period. He's the 3rd highest paid NFL player in 2021. $2 million of that is restructured money. The rest of it is what his cap hit would have been anyway. He would have been at 24. The restructure money makes him at $26 million. So he'll hold up the 1 defensive end spot. After that, there's a lot of question marks. A lot of question marks about depth here. Alex Okafor made $5 million this season. In 2021, he's a free agent. I do not expect him to be back. Even if the Chiefs didn't have budget concerns, I don't think Okafor would be back pretty much at any price. We all would have liked to have seen him play better than what he played. He contributed. He was a part of what the Chiefs did. He did contribute, but at $5 million, I don't think we all got as much as we might have hoped for when he first got here to Kansas City. And so even if there weren't budget concerns, I don't think we would see Okafor back. But there are budget concerns in Kansas City because you have the Mahomes contract kicking in, the Frank Clark contract continuing to grow, and then the Chris Jones contract kicking in, and then, of course, the Tyrann Mathieu contract there, and a couple of other contracts as well. So because of the budget concerns, even if they liked him at $5 million, he wouldn't be back. So that's 2 different reasons not to bring Okafor back. I would be totally shocked if Okafor is back with the team next year. He did contribute, but he did not really hold down, what you would call a starting job. He was not able to, he was not able to perform at the level you would like to see a guy perform when you bring them as a free agent and you pay them $5 million a season. I'll put it that way and leave it right there, okay? Michael Dana is a guy that gives you a little bit of hope. Dana contributed last year, kind of like all of these guys did right here. Dana contributed in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback. He contributed in the run game. He was just part of the mix. And I don't remember exactly how many snaps he got. I want to say it was 300, 400, something like that. It might have even been more. But he was a part. He was a contributor. And because of his age, because that's his first season, you have every reason to hope at $1 million, you can't beat the price, that Dana can step up and get a lot of playing time next year and look good doing it. That's the key. You can hand him all the playing time you want, but you want him to look good doing it. And I have reason to hope, because of his age and because of what we saw in season number 1, that he can actually do that. Can he step up and grab what you would call that starting defensive end spot? I don't know about that yet. Still kind of early to see about that. But Dana will be in the mix, and he looked decent this year, and I think you can look for him to grow heading into the next season. Passanio is a free agent. This, I think, will be the end. Basically, what was a 4-year project, a 4-year experiment. You know, when they picked him up out of Villanova, they liked his athleticism. They knew he was raw. They knew he was a project. It basically took 2 seasons for him to even really get on the field and get major playing time. In year number 3, 2019, you saw him start to get in the mix a little bit. This year, he actually contributed. He was a valuable contributor this year. But he's still not there in terms of a guy that you want to bring back and give extra money to. At $1 million, I forget if he was $1 million plus or $1 million minus, but at that price, he was fine. He was part of the rotation. You were glad to have him, but I think we've seen the end of his time with Kansas City. I don't know what they think about him exactly, but we'll see. I don't think we're going to see them bring him back. Taco Carlton is a guy who's been in the league for a while. Again, he contributed. Maybe not as much as we all hope, but again, the price was right. Didn't have to pay him a lot. The Chiefs might actually bring Carlton back just because I don't think the price tag on him is going to grow any. There's a very good chance that some other team in the NFL will look at Passanio and say, here's a guy who's just now coming into his own, and we think he can actually develop. Since for 4 years he's basically been raw in a project, and he's just now coming into his own. Don't be surprised if somebody in the NFL doesn't hand money to Passanio, not huge money, but some kind of money to come in and bring some athleticism and fill in that void at defensive end. I don't think Kansas City can afford to kind of speculate a little bit here with Passanio, but you kind of know what Carlton is, and you kind of know about what the price tag is going to be. So I wouldn't be surprised if they brought him back, but I it wouldn't surprise me if they let him go either and bring somebody else in there at defensive end. These are your top people here at defensive end. You got a couple other guys on the practice squad. These are the major ones. What's interesting here, a couple things before we close down. The defensive tackle position is so deep, and the defensive end position is filled with either free agents or question marks in terms of depth. And you don't have any more money to throw at these positions. There is no more money coming here in 2021 unless they do a lot of restructuring, which I highly, highly, highly discourage and advise against. But unless they do any of that, you're not going to pour more money into this position. You're already spending, just on 2 players alone, $48 million in cap space in 21 alone, and you're tied to that number for a few years to come too. So don't expect more money here. You might see a draft pick invested here at defensive end. We'll see about that. But the one thing that you could do, I mentioned Travelle Wharton here is a guy who I think can play on the edge. I don't know what his best position is. It probably is still there at defensive tackle, that interior defensive line, that third defensive end, however you want to, whatever defensive alignment they're in. That's his better position, but I think Wharton shows the quickness, shows the intelligence to where you could push him out to the edge to play that defensive end position, and that would leave Noddy here taking up the defensive tackle. If you bring Pennell back, he would kind of be the backup defensive tackle. Saunders here would also be backup defensive tackle. Jones here would be defensive tackle. I've heard this mentioned before, I have no interest in pushing Jones out to defensive end for this reason alone. It's not that he can't play it, he can. Defensive ends, edge rushers right now, are having a hard time getting to the quarterbacks because of the NFL offenses these days, because of the zones that defenses play, and because of how quick NFL offenses have become at getting rid of the football. They can usually find somebody open, even if it's just for a quick 2 to 5 yard hit. It's really difficult right now for defensive ends and edge rushers, unless they are just the purest of the elite, to get to the quarterback from those edge positions. And Chris Jones, as good as he is, it's going to put him a little bit farther from the quarterback to be out there at the defensive end position. The best thing to do right now these days, if you want to get pressure on the quarterback, is to have a guy at defensive tackle who can get pressure up the middle. The quickest point is A to B, right in the quarterback's face, and that's what Chris Jones does. So I have zero interest, even though I know he's capable of moving Chris Jones out to defensive end. I would leave him right there at defensive tackle. What I would like to see possibly is Frank Clark working in combo. If Frank Clark seems to work better, if you look back at his time in Seattle and you look back at his first year in Kansas City, he seems to work better when he gets to twist and stunt a lot. And Kansas City just didn't do a whole lot of that with him. They usually kind of left him on his own out there on the edge to do his own work. I think Frank Clark would do even better if he could work some with Travelle Wharton, kind of as a two-man combo, doing twists and stunts, which you usually saw more often than not when they were on the field at the same time. This year for Kansas City, you usually saw Frank Clark with Chris Jones. Now, you don't twist and stunt with Chris Jones because he can get the quarterback all by himself. So while in theory, at least, these guys took pressure off of each other, that's really not what happened. But ultimately what happened is the tackle would end up blocking Frank Clark all by himself, or the tight end would block Frank Clark all by himself. And you would still have Chris Jones being double and triple teamed because Chris Jones is better at getting to the quarterback, and Chris Jones is already closer to the quarterback at the defensive tackle position. What ended up happening was they really didn't take a whole lot of pressure off of each other, and teams just decided to do that. We'll single block Frank Clark with the tight end or tackle, and we'll keep double and triple teaming Chris Jones. So what I would really like to see is Chris Jones stay at the defensive tackle on the one side, and Frank Clark, who flip-flops all over to both defensive end positions anyway, and even sometimes move on the inside. I would love to see Frank Clark getting to play right alongside Travelle Wharton and watching those two guys twist and stunt and kind of do their own thing on their side of the defensive line. I think that would be a good combo. Both guys are certainly flexible enough to do it. I think both guys are smart enough to do it. They seem to have that really football IQ. They seem to have the high motors. That's something I think you could see maybe more of from the Kansas City Chiefs in 2021. And that's something I kind of watched since we did videos this year. But you can look for that. If they don't do that, if they don't want to move Wharton out, and if we leave Jones right there, then you do need to start bringing somebody in here at defensive end for a little bit of depth. We'll see what the Chiefs do with that. Overall, though, you have every reason to expect this to be a good starting group. The rotation might not be as good, but the starters, the top 5 guys, could actually be better. If we see growth from Noddy, if we see more growth from Travelle Wharton, if we see any growth at all from Saunders, if we see growth from those 3 young guys, in theory, though the defensive line may not be as deep and it might be a little bit more injury prone, it could actually be more talented and could actually be better performing when everybody is on the field, just because of those 3 guys continuing to develop and get better. We'll see about all that. I think that's it. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.